Evolution in Divine Love is an invitation to reimagine everything from the place where it all begins and where it all returns. Love.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Evolution in Divine Love podcast. Today, we'll be speaking first with Swami Padmanabha, the author of Evolution in Divine Love, followed by a conversation with Brian McLaren. Today's talk will be about a section in Chapter 3, which is called Mapping the Soul's Unbroken Potential. And the section's title is The Soul is Possessed of Volcanic Energy, for Better and Worse. So thank you all for joining us today. Just for those of it who might not be familiar with this section of the book, Maharaj, you share Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati's description of the soul as possessing volcanic energy. So what does this metaphor reveal about the soul's nature in bhakti?
I will say, of course, he primarily refers in this case to our highest potential in love. And in that connection, he will use the term volcanic. So we have the potential in the context of love of basically becoming a volcano, erupting a very shiny lava of divine love, ecstatic love, like a volcano is erupting. The soul has the potential to erupt in ecstasy, in the lava of divine love. So basically, it's a line to not underestimate our potential, which seems to be something that we are very expert at. Underestimating who we are, all that we can be, and all that everyone can be in both directions, of course. Then I try to add to that, as we maybe will explore in a few moments, how that we have volcanic energy speaks of potential in both directions, right? So, of course, your question is in the brightest directions of divine love eruption, so to say, though we have also the darkest potential to go in very, unfortunate directions. But in terms of bhakti and potential, yeah, we are units of potential, as we've been talking many times. And therefore, we are to be defined according to all that we can be. And in the utmost generosity, we are to be defined in all that we can be in terms of our brightest potential, which for us in our tradition is to be found and explored in the landscape of love. So that's how I like to think when Krishna refers in the Bhagavad Gita to the self in general as Atma in Sanskrit. And when he speaks about the soul embracing its potential love, Krishna will use the word Mahatma, or great soul, speaking about a being who has actualized her potential, at least to some degree, because again, there's no end to the exploration of our potential. We are units of potential, and as I also mentioned in this section, someone like a guru in our tradition is basically a facilitator of potential, a mirror of potential, an embodiment of all that we can be, and a facilitator of the exploration of that potential. So yeah, all this and more is meant by this idea of the soul having volcanic energy. We have lots of energy, lots of potential, and we need to know what to do with that.
Yeah, thank you for that. And you touched upon the guru, which we were going to go to next. You spend a lot of time in this section speaking about the guru and the relationship between the guru and the disciple and the student's potentiality. So it's said that the guru is to see us not as we are now, but as our highest potential. So how can we begin to see ourselves and others through the same lens?
Yeah, that's a very important point and worthy of exploration, because for me, at the end of the day, it's what gives us not only hope but also the capacity to forgive, which is a crucial expression of love, in the sense of if I'm witnessing someone who is behaving in a very volcanic way, but in the darkest directions, the only way I can somehow deal with that situation in a way that gives hope and opens the door for love is seeing that person according to their brightest potential, even if momentarily that person may be showing exactly the opposite of that. And as we always say, when that's the case, we can take that as an indirect message, because that how low we can fall, so to say, is basically an indirect way of showing how high we can fly if we will just express our potential in the context of love. So I think that's a good way. I mean, we can start applying all that to us, right? Who on a daily basis many times fall short, let's put it that way, of our brightest potential, and end up exploring our darkest potential in terms of failure, shame, fear, dualism, so many things that fall short, or as I also mentioned in the book, represent what Christianity will call hamartia, or missing the mark, like falling short of our potential, missing the mark, another way of putting that. So how to see ourselves in those moments of embarrassment, of falling short, where we feel I'm falling short, I'm not up to my potential, I'm not up to all that I can be. I'm trying to shower upon ourselves, and of course not only upon ourselves, but some self-compassion, self-understanding, in terms of, despite I have this unlimited, volcanic, beautiful potential, it doesn't mean that I will always hit the aim, so to say. Because also, speaking about brightest potential, without proper capacity for self-understanding can become such a huge burden, because we could always feel I'm falling short from my potential, because at the end of the day, our best potential is ever evolving. So in one sense, we will always be falling short of that, because the potential is always growing and becoming bigger. So we have to know how to deal with all these ideas in a healthy, sustainable way. Yeah.
It seems like acknowledging our own shortcomings, our own failings to hit the mark is like a basis of compassion, not
Yeah.
just self-compassion, but for others.
Yeah. Makes total sense. Sorry, so I have to do. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about this particular thing where you say that it's important to acknowledge our potential for our dark potential, to be able to, like, move towards the bright potential also. And it's not so much just about going toward bright potential, but acknowledging and making a deliberate choice to move towards the brighter side. So, well, there were a couple of things that I was thinking about. One thing I thought is that where is this dark thing coming from? Is that a part of God as well? Like, is he also making a deliberate choice? Or is it just a part of, like, it's just a thing with the souls, that we have this potential for, like, both dark and bright sides?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when you say it's God's making a deliberate choice, you mean in which sense?
Like, here you say that, like, we us acknowledging our, like, potential for dark things, for evil, but we make a deliberate choice, acknowledging that we make a deliberate choice to move towards brighter side, like, toward our bright potential. So I was wondering if that is the case with God too, like, in the sense that he has all of it within him, present potential in both directions, but somehow he's all still on the brighter side, something like that.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. Our tradition will say that in the case of the divine, there is only bright potential. so to say. Of course, the divine, because as we always say, if God will have the potential, and of course, this is a big conversation because some people say, well, if God doesn't have that opportunity, then you are limiting God. But also at the same time, if we allow anything and everything to be part of God, because if not, we will be limiting that. We will end up in very absurd places at times. So there are certain things that, at least in our theology, will be compromising God's ontology, on God's position, God's status, and one of them will be that he becomes subject to illusion or evil or darkness, whatever we may like to call it. So we will make the point that in the case of the divine, the sweet absolute has unlimited potential, volcanic energy of its own type, but expressed exclusively in the context of divine love, whether it is in divine love, enlightened love, with his enlightened companions, but also in the form of compassion and compassionate love in terms of those who are still covered by some form of illusion. Again, we are talking about the divine, which, as much as that which most resembles God here may be us, if you want to put it that way, still there is some categorical difference between the two of us. So we cannot force too many parallels between God and the soul in every sense of the term. So one of those is that, and as our tradition will describe, some qualities that the soul possesses that somehow are possessed by God in a bigger quantity, but there are some qualities that only the divine possesses and we do not. And one of those is, again, his status of remaining beyond the potential for darkness, so to say, though at the same time him having a very deep capacity to empathize with our potential in that direction, which again, that's not something that God created, as we always said. We happen to be that. We happen to exist eternally as individual beings. We happen not to be God. And we happen to have free will, which by necessity entails the possibility of choosing in more than one direction apart from love. And the second option has to be considerably different from the first one for it to make any sense and to be an actual different option. And that's what we have when we end up missing the mark, when we end up remaining unaware of our potential, seeing reality through dualistic lenses, and so on and so forth. But I wouldn't say that the divine, at least from the perspective of our tradition, has the potential of going in that direction. He has the potential of fully understanding what's going on in that direction when one chooses to go there. And from that place, he provides instruction and knowledge for those of us who are there, so we can know how to recalibrate our perspective of reality. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. This is really helpful because somebody did talk about this recently regarding, all things are coming from God, even like the dark side, everything is coming from God, So I was kind of like, wondering uh, if that really is true, like that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's of course, it's a very general way to speak about it, but then we need to become specific, and words fail many times. We will describe God as the sun, and in one sense, we will say that in the sun there is no there is no shadow, literally, right? There's no darkness. That said, of course, there's another type of darkness if you want to speak about the darkness of separation and of the divine missing his beloved, but it's a categorical different type of darkness. But of course, by extension, if we want to talk about the souls and the material energy and the effect of illusion or ignorance of them, of course, that's not God in one sense, but that's God in the sense that those are God's energies, but he's not exactly identical with all of that. And then we enter into the nuance of Achintya Veda Ved, one and different. So depending from which perspective we are talking, we could say something like that. Okay, there is darkness in God in the sense that we are part and parcel of one of his energies, and we may be subjected to that influence. And in that sense only we could say that. But at the same time, God is a unique individual who remains beyond that influence. though we remain an inseparable energy from him. So again, it's bed a bed. We cannot go too much to one extreme nor to the other.
Thank you for saying that. And also another thing in relation to the same topic was I was thinking how sometimes like some of us could end up becoming proud of the choices we make, right? Like, and look down on others like, oh, look, they're just doing bad, and like, you know, all of that. And now we are choosing the right good path, which we kind of see in the world where people not acknowledging shadow side and, you know, becoming proud and like going to the extremes and end up being violent. Like, yeah, if you have any more like, you know, words on that.
Well, I would say that if we choose the right path, really, we don't have any reason to feel entitled, so to say, that we have chosen that path or that is our own merit, because any right path, it's a gift. It ultimately entails a good measure of grace. It's not our exclusive merit, though of course we do our part. We cannot deny that on some level, but we are not the ultimate absolute exclusive doers of anything. That's what Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 3:27. Those who consider themselves the only doers are in deep illusion, so, and the pride that comes from that. So I will say that any genuine treading on a path of truth, path of beauty, path of spaciousness, entails the realization, must include the realization, the humbling realization that there is grace involved here. There is a gift, matchless gift. So I don't have any actual reason to become proud, but all the reasons to become humble. But again, that implies a very deep, vigilant awareness of what it means to tread that path. So it's tricky because, of course, again, you may thread that path for a moment and very quickly misread the path and put your signature below. And yeah, this is me acknowledging this, knowing this, doing that. And immediately by doing that, you're out of the path for at that precise moment. So that's what our teachers will call whatever, Tarangarangini, Bhakti, Tanartha, different terms to indicate like different traps we may fall into after beginning threading the path. Before treading the sacred path, we were falling into other traps. And then you start treading the paths and you fall into traps related to not to the essence of the path, but misreading the path, misreading the nature of the gifts coming from the path and ascribing those to ourselves, so to say. So that's another level of conversation that every practitioner needs to have after starting the path. Before that, no need for that, because you are not treading the path, you don't have that particular danger. But once you start, there's all the chances of eventually going there. So it's an ongoing journey of increased awareness and humility of what it means to tread the path in a perfect way, perfect, quote unquote, in the sense of perfectly sincere, perfectly honest, perfectly humble, and more acknowledging the influence of grace in our journey.
This opens up the, you speak of this in this section about the divine GPS. So it seems to apply to this also, to know that grace is coming in this way as a guidance. So how does the image of the divine GPS help us understand God's ongoing presence in our lives? And do you think that also can help us address and keep an eye on the aspect of humility?
Yeah, because for me, the divine GPS and the recalculating of the divine GPS is basically giving ourselves another chance and another chance and another chance, like another chance after the failure, after the betrayal, that we not only receive, but many times offer to others, the turning our back onto the divine, choosing to numb ourselves, amnesia and anesthesia. And still the GPS is saying recalculating. Now, recalculating basically means rearranging the environment for us to continue to have hope, rearranging the environment so still there is light at the end of the tunnel, though we make sometimes choices to prevent light to entering from the tunnel. So the fact that we know that there is such an arrangement in the environment should be deeply humbling. Because again, despite our lack of merit, or I shall say, despite the merit we have in the wrong direction, now that the actions that sometimes we take or decisions we take to basically not deserve the highest keeps coming and keeps rearranging itself in an even more generous disposition, proportionate to our unwillingness to accept that embrace. The divine environment rearranges itself, recalibrates, recalculates to still try to offer us the best possible entry point, considering where we are. So it's an ongoing process of adaptation and adjustment from the divine, from the environment toward us, like in service to us. So that's very humbling. From my, I will say, at times I may be doing nothing to earn that, to deserve that. I'm not doing anything to invite that, but still that arrangement is happening in an ongoing way. So the more we awaken to that reality, again, the more humbling that is, and the more it invites us in a very humbling way to adjust accordingly, to accommodate the environment that comes to us, to accommodate ourselves in relationship to others, keeping in mind how much ongoing adjustment is happening to accommodate us so we still belong, so to say, right? We always say everything belongs. So nice quote. But everything belongs because the divine and environment is constantly adjusting for us to still belong. Because many times, if it were for us only, we may just not belong and run away from what belonging means, so to say. But the nature of love and the nature of the environment is to hold space and adjust and recalculate so we can still belong and continue to belong forever. So again, if we have eyes to see, ears to hear, the invitation will become more and more clear, like, okay, now you do the same. Now you try to replicate the message, the embrace, and return that to everyone, holding a space for everyone as much as we can. Again, it's a gradual process, but having an awareness that that's already taking place forever, since ever, and in an ongoing way, I think will create a very enough inspiration for us to try to do that on some level ourselves toward others, extending that embrace.
That's beautiful, and you do speak about that in this section also. And hearing you speak, I just kept getting the vision of, left to our own devices, we tend to find all the dead ends. We follow our own way and make the choices that go to very restrictive scenarios. But the GPS seems to open us up to a vastness, and you mentioned that in regards to potential. So always seems to offer the vastness of potential, even though we constrict and restrict ourselves and others by measuring them against their past as opposed to their brightest potential.
Yeah. Amen to that. And as we were talking recently these days with a friend here in Glastonbury, UK, where we are now recording this episode, and the word spaciousness came, right? That's an interesting word to contemplate in connection to this. Know how to hold space, another way of saying spaciousness, as how to develop the quality of spaciousness, which is basically not only a rearrangement of the environment, but an expanded environment, to an in depth, in breadth, to accommodate, to host ourselves in our escapism or who knows what, left to our own devices, you say, and just running many times mechanically to a dead ends. And still the environment keeps invoking spaciousness, no? Becoming bigger, becoming deeper, becoming broader. So spaciousness. So again, if we listen attentively, the wind will be sharing those news back to us. Spaciousness, no? That's our dharma, that's our duty, right? To create spaciousness in our relationships, in ourselves, in how we walk life, right? To be units of expanding spaciousness. That's a good way to articulate that. Yeah. So having reached that spacious space, maybe we can put the discussion to rest and rest ourselves there for a while.
So, welcome to our second part of Evolution in Divine Love podcast, where we will be continuing our discussion on the soul is possessed of volcanic energy, for better or for worse. And in this section, we are so pleased, enlivened, and to welcome Brian McLaren with us here today. It's such an honor and such an amazing opportunity to have Brian here today. He, for those who might not know who he is, which I'm sorry for that, but he is a theologian and a faculty member at the for Action and Contemplation. He's an author, and you'll see his name many, many times in the back of Swami Padmanabha's books. I first came into contact with Brian while Maharaj was writing Radical Personalism, and he was finished with the book, and he was writing the introduction actually, and he was struggling with what to put in there. And Maharaj tells this story also, and a book had recently arrived called "Do I Stay a Christian?" So he was leafing through that, and the inspiration came to actually how to unfold the introduction. And Maharaj's 10 reasons to leave Gaudiya Vaishnavism, 10 reasons to stay Gaudiya Vaishnavism, have also helped to shape my own spiritual journey as well. So even though you have no idea, you never met me before, you have been influential in the trajectory of my spiritual life. So I so much appreciate you and what you bring to the table.
Well, thank you, Bhakti-Rasa. It's an honor to be with you. It's an honor to be with you, Svetadweep. And I'll just say that getting to know Swami Padmanabha has been one of the real joys of the last decade of my life. So I'm really so glad to be with you, and so glad to talk about the chapter from Evolution in Divine Love that we're going to discuss, because I love this chapter. I think it's beautifully written. It's true. It's balanced. And it's something I needed to hear when I read it recently.
Yeah, sometimes we need to hear these things when we read them and also when we write them.
Yes, that's right.
So I'll start us off today just with a question, and then we'll explore from there, see where it goes organically. But in this section, the text speaks of the soul's volcanic energy. It's as a force that can create or destroy. So how does this resonate with your own reflections on human potential in the Christian or the wider contemplative tradition?
Yes. Well, first, the deeper project that this book represents, I think, in Swami's work is a project that it has a unique set of challenges for me in the Christian tradition. And let me explain it like this. In Christian theology, and we don't need to go into all of the intricacies and details of this, but in the early centuries of Christianity, the early Christians, who were all Jewish at the very beginning, and then it expanded to include a wider array of people, they embraced a couple of key ideas from Greek philosophy. And one of those ideas is that being is normative and becoming is an aberration. I could say it that way. And in fact, they accepted some ideas from Greek philosophy about God or the divine that that included words that are well known in Christian theology, like uh, uh, immutability and omnipotence and omnipresence and so on. And and in Greek philosophy, one of these words, actually two of these words are super important. One was impassibility and one was immutability. And immutability means incapable of change, and impassibility means incapable of feeling or having experiences or emotion. And these ideas were very precious in Greek philosophy. I guess the idea was it put God above, it put the divine above all change, and it put the divine in a unique category of changelessness. And this was connected to their ideas of perfection, because if something is perfect, if it changes, it only changes for the worse, so it can't change. I remember in my own life I was a pastor for 24 years, and and I remember having this sort of realization one day that that Greek idea meant that God was sterile. Because if something can't change, it can't really do anything, because to do something would be a change. It can't produce anything. It can't be fertile. That would be a change. And then I realized that in the Bible, the first, and this is from the Jewish scriptures, the first chapter of Genesis, it begins by saying that God creates the world and the world is good. And I remember this little sentence popped into my mind: Hebrew good is better than Greek perfect, because good is fertile, good is creative, good produces newness, good produces beauty. And that set off a little set of challenges in my own thinking, because I'd been taught by people who had accepted these ideas from Greek philosophy, which have merit and there's some value to them. I'm not saying they're terrible and worthless, but I think it was a mistake for the Christian religion to lift these ideas up so high that then they created other unintended consequences. But as I grappled with this, it, in a sense, enriched my understanding not only of God, to think of God as a creative, dynamic source, who is not opposed to change and wants the world to get fixed so that nothing ever happens again, but rather to see the dynamism and creative power and fertility and wonder and delight of the divine. But then that helps me see myself in a new way too, because then I think the idea isn't to achieve some unchanging state of perfection. The idea is to join in the creative, dynamic, unfolding work. And so um, this idea has had huge ramifications in my own thinking. And if you're interested, we could talk about this, but it is really shaking up a lot of areas of Christian theology.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I do think that these are two like really important topics. The to understand perfection, and I really appreciate how Maharaj um, caveats that it has no that perfection does not have a fixed maximum.
Mm, mm,
So even though something's perfect, it can become even more perfect, and that more
yes.
perfect can become more perfect endlessly, because
Yes.
it's not about going out or getting bigger. It's about going deeper, and
Yes.
that's always yeah. There's no fixed maximum. So even if somebody wants to hold on to the idea of perfection, there's no
Yes.
end to perfection. And today's another teacher in our lineage, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he says that actually it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur, that today's perfection becomes tomorrow's imperfection,
Yes.
and we experience that on a daily basis, and our technology speaks that to us all the time.
In fact, in the chapter we're going to discuss today, Swami quotes Gregory of Nyssa, one of the early church theologians, who said that sin is essentially a refusal to grow. And this sense that, I love the way Swami Padmanabha says it, no fixed maximum to perfection. In fact, we might say that the true perfection of perfection is its infinite progression, its infinite exploration. And of course, we see this in the history of the universe unfolding. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for that unfolding.
Yeah, and how perfection includes imperfection. It's not that they're two isolated things that don't exist in relationship with each other, but perfection includes imperfection, and that's part of its perfection. And I appreciate that you brought up the quote from Gregory Nyssa, and I had that also to speak with you about that. Swami describes that evil could be understood as missed potential.
Yes.
And I've kind of come to I've seen that along these same lines, that the greatest sin, or the way that we miss the mark the most, is if we help convince people that they're not lovable.
Mm.
And that's the most violent thing that we can perpetrate
Yes.
upon others. So I'm wondering how this reframing of sin as missing the mark, and failure, and growth, how we think of those things, how does that reframing change how you live your life and approach your own theology?
Yes. Well, let me just make an observation about this. I feel this is such a helpful question, Bhakti Rasa. If we have an idea of a fixed perfection, a perfection that has already reached its maximum limit, and if that idea we have almost absolutized to say that the universe has its maximum limit, it renders us very vulnerable to authoritarian leaders who come and say to us, I represent the maximum limit. I represent perfection, or my regime, or my government, or my political system, or my economic system represents the best it could be. And anyone who criticizes this system is criticizing the perfect thing, which makes you a danger and a threat. So the very idea is susceptible to abuse by authoritarian leaders. When we have this idea that growth is built into the universe, and that maturity means moving toward our potential, that maturity isn't even a maximum limit. It's something that always beckons us forward. When we have that understanding, nothing is exempt from potential improvement, including me, including others, and including powers and systems and so on.
And would you agree, including God?
Yes, well, the beauty then of God is that God represents this continual beckoning from, we might say, the future, or from unfulfilled potential to continuing growth. And if we were to catch up with what the voice calls us to now, the voice has moved farther ahead of us. So it's always this call toward growth, this call toward new horizons, and that doesn't mean the things in the past were bad. It just means it was all we could handle in the past. That understanding of perfection or goodness or whatever was all we were ready for. It was the maximum we could imagine. But once we get there, comes the new possibility for new things to open.
What comes to my mind hearing you both speak is that the part where Maharaj says how until and unless we acknowledge our potential for darkness, like the evil,
Yes.
cannot fully embrace our brighter potential too. So I
Yes.
wondered, like, do you see that being a reason why someone could be like unwilling to grow or think
Mm,
of something like perfection being a fixed thing? You know,
yeah.
because we wouldn't want to look at our, tendency for dark potential.
Yes. Um, Sveta, this is something I loved about this chapter, um, because I think Swami beautifully helps us both balance the potential for good, the potential for love, the potential for empathy and kindness and compassion. And also, we have to acknowledge our potential for destruction, our potential for greed. We can become cleverer and cleverer in our ability to cause harm. And we can call that progress. And we can make a lot of money doing that, right? Often the things that make the most money are not the things that really lead us forward, but they're things that they bring short-term profit at long-term cost, short-term benefit at long-term harm. And so this understanding, I think, humbles us and requires us to be willing to have second thoughts. Uh, uh, to say, boy, I thought I was doing the right thing there, but now I realize there was an unintended negative consequence of what I did. And it might have worked in the short run, but in the long run, it really caused harm. I have 4 adult children, all in their 40s. And a few years ago, one of my sons, we were talking, and he said, Dad, I remember something that happened when I was a boy. Maybe he was 8 or 9 years old. And he said, you asked me to do something that that avoided hurting somebody else, but it really hurt me. And I want to explain how that happened. And I was so glad he came and talked to me about this, because as soon as he explained it, I thought, of course that hurt you deeply. And I'm so sorry. And I realized in thinking about this other person, I didn't think about the impact it had on you. And so this willingness to always face uh, Sveta Dweep, our potential for even unintended harm, I think this gives us a sense of humility and correctability, and uh, that helps us in seeking to fulfill our potential, to do so with a certain kind of gentleness rather than this driving ambition and certainty.
Yeah, that is so beautiful. And the other thing I'm thinking is also that the reason we don't want to think of, like, our potential for like evil, or like, like, yeah, less favorable, like, less nice things, to put it mildly. Um, it's because we think then we are not lovable, like
Yes.
somehow we always have to be perfect, always have to be pleasing.
Yeah.
Otherwise, like, we're not lovable. Even the thought that, like, no, 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 we can't do that. We can't, like, we are not capable of, like, doing the harm, and that was unintentional, or what. I mean, what you're saying about acknowledging even the ability to cause harm unintentionally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing that you can, like, someone can go there,
Yeah.
but many a times even intentional harm we don't want
Yes.
to
Yes.
accept.
Yes. Yes. So true. So true. Yeah. Uh, and, I think we live with this every day, but I think this teaching that many of us received, that there's this absolute standard for good and evil, and it's very clear and it's always unchanging and it's written down in a list of rules or whatever it might be, that makes us judge ourselves and judge others harshly. And then leads us to think I'm unlovable. And if I start to think I'm unlovable because, I'm in this category now of the bad and the imperfect and the so on, then living with that shame, I think, and that insecurity can increase my temptation to try to make myself better by trying to make other people seem worse than me. But if instead I live in a different framework entirely, where the calling is, or the baseline is that divine love accepts me where I am, even if I were to make a series of bad decisions over the next 3 years of my life, where I, by every measure, became a worse person over the next 3 years. 3 years from now, I come to realize what's happened and realize that I've been loved at every moment. And the love is an invitation to turn from the bad path that I've taken for these 3 years, right? That living in that world is a very, very different world. And when people can see it, I think they wouldn't want to go back.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, that's a struggle, right? It's not easy. I mean, yeah, I wonder, once we come to understand that and actually realizing and living, there is a bit of a gap in that. That's what I see.
Yes.
Um, like what do you think about it? Like, have you had this experience yourself, or like, seeing people around you?
Yes.
Mm.
Well, in those times when I have to be, let me say, gracious or merciful to myself, where I have to, well, can I tell you a quick story about this? Because I was just visiting my daughter and granddaughter, and they had a beautiful interchange that expresses this perfectly. My granddaughter is, let's say this happened when she was 7 or 8. She's 9 now. And she was really in a bad mood. And I think we can all remember what it was like to be little kids and you're just in a bad mood and you lose control and you just don't have the ability to keep it together. And she was very, very good at expressing her frustration in those times. And instead of making her feel guilty, you're being immature, you're being misbehaving, my daughter very kindly said to her, you are a really good kid who's having a really hard time right now. And I just thought, what a gracious way to say it. Well, a few months later, my daughter was having a bad day. And she was downstairs cleaning the house, but she said she was cleaning aggressively. I think we all know we've had those times. You set things down, you put it down a book, you move this, and she was making a lot of noise as she was cleaning up. And her daughter, she hears footsteps coming down the steps, and her daughter comes over and gives her a hug and says, "Are you okay, Mom?" She said, "You're a very good mom, having a very hard time." And it
Yeah.
was just this chain reaction of, instead of shaming, it was accepting that we all have a hard time sometimes. And then inviting us to acknowledge that, which in a way opens the possibility for change. It's this, the word in Christian theology that came to capture this was the word grace. This idea that there's mercy, there's grace when we're having that bad day or in that bad time, or there's something we keep doing that's harmful again and again, but it's because we didn't know any better, or we were taught we were doing the right thing when we were doing this thing that turns out to be harmful. And then grace says, well, it's okay. You can admit that was a mistake. And this divine potential to take a turn toward what's better. Just one other quick example from this. I I was transplanting. I live in Florida, which is a semi-tropical climate, and one of the great joys of my life is that I get to grow mango trees in my yard. And I was transplanting some mango seedlings that I had planted and am preparing for grafting. And the one of these seedlings had been growing in the shade of another tree. And because it was in the shade of another tree, it had grown straight up and then took like a turn. And so the trunk of this little sapling was bent in a curve. Well, the reason it was bent in a curve is because of where it was growing. It had to curve to get to the sunlight. So now I just transplanted it into full sun, and over time it will now be able to straighten up more. And sometimes it's just the realization, oh, I of course I've turned out this way. uh, it's because of where I've been, but now I'm ready to. I have new possibilities have opened up to me.
Wow, that's amazing. That it makes me think like how we see in nature, maybe then like with plants, they are actually moving towards light,
Yes.
and because of the condition, the previous condition, it was bent, but still it is moving toward light.
Yes.
And I also love the story of your daughter and granddaughter. That's amazing. I was thinking it must be so nice to kind of just witness that even,
Yes.
How often do you get to see something like that?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that.
Another aspect of that story is that neither your daughter like didn't insert herself in your granddaughter's feelings. She
Yeah.
allowed her own space, her own feelings, and then also
Yeah.
your granddaughter then didn't, accept responsibility
Yeah.
for her mother's feelings and just said, "Oh, you're a great mom having a hard time," instead of like taking that on herself as a type of guilt, like, "Oh, my mom's having a hard time because I'm, a bad
Yes.
kid." you know
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
that's right. We can, it's so different to be in entanglements of guilt and shame and blame. Like so much of our lives, it feels like we get stuck in those entanglements. But there's a different kind of positive entanglement, an entanglement with divine love, an entanglement with the invitation to grow, entanglement with grace. It's, yeah, it's very different.
yeah,
Yeah.
we want to be entangled with the right thing.
Yes.
Yeah. This is something I'm going to like, take it with me, I think. Like I'm thinking, even if somebody is not going to say that to me when I'm having a hard day, I can say it to myself.
Yes. Yes, that's right. That's right.
Another thing that came while you were speaking is that if we don't feel lovable, then why would we want to offer ourselves to God?
Mm, yeah.
If we ourselves want to be the offering, if we think that we're something despicable or horrible, full of, unlovable things, then why would we want to offer ourselves in service
Yes.
unto God?
Yes, and I think this explains why so many people, when they hear the word religion or spirituality, they just think, "Oh, this is the context that always makes me feel dirty and despicable and unacceptable and so on." Yeah, and it doesn't have to be that way, but we have to acknowledge it. It often is that way. Um, yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
we weaponize the
yeah,
most beautiful thing. We weaponize it because that is our nature, and that's what we want. We want to be accepted
yes,
unconditionally. So that can
yes.
be easily weaponized and turned against us.
So well said. Um, there is a kind of, I call it a kind of religious mafia. The mafia works by somebody you have a store and somebody knocks on the door and says, "Are you the owner of the store?" "Yes, I am." This is a really great store. It would be a terrible thing if somebody set this store on fire. If you pay us $100 a week, we will make sure that no one sets your store on fire. And of course, this is a veiled threat, right? Well, there's that sort of racket. Another word for that mafia is called a protection racket, which says we will threaten you and then we will protect you from our threat for a price. And there's a lot of that works in politics and works in religion and works in corporations and so on. But this is the very opposite. This kind of divine love that Swami is talking about in this beautiful book and in this beautiful chapter is this invitation out of the mafia and into a kind of freedom and opportunity to grow and to grow toward the light, as we were saying.
Yeah. One thing I remember as you're talking about like growth earlier on also, is that there's a part where Maharaj is saying that if we resist our growth, we're also what's the word he says? We're restricting God's expansion as well. Like,
Yes.
yeah, I was wondering if you have more words to explain this, like
Yes.
how do you see it? What comes to your mind when you read that?
Yes. Well, let me share just a quick example of this in Christian theology that I think people from any tradition could understand. Um, in Christian theology, for centuries and centuries, we magnified God as being, the ultimate, which is, I suppose, true. But what we did is we took creation and put creation in this totally different category. So God is in this transcendent category, and the philosophical term for all of the universe, all of creation, is an immanent category, sort of the down to earth, a high category, a low category, a changeless category, and a changing category, where changeless was inherently good and changing was subpar, imperfect. And as we were saying before, but Jesus used this at the core of Jesus' message when he traveled around. The core of his message was not God. The core of his message was the kingdom of God. And if you think of it this way, what is a kingdom? A kingdom is a land or a place. Now, the king is a part of that place, but the kingdom and the quality of the king represents the quality of the place. So if you have a good and kind king, you would expect the place to have some goodness and kindness. If you have a just king, you would expect the kingdom to have some justice. If you had a wicked, greedy, corrupt king, you'd expect the nation, the kingdom to show that same corruption. And so at the core of Jesus' message was, in a sense, to say, look, we have to think bigger than God. We have to think God and all of the creation, all of the realm to which God is connected. And what I think Jesus was doing there is he was saying there's some people would be very offended with what I'm about to say, but I think graciously people can understand there's something bigger than God. God as this separate category, but there's God in love with all of creation, God and all that God creates. And that larger reality, then we then realize my life, in one sense, it's so insignificant. 8.5 billion people are alive now. Something like 100 billion human beings have existed across history. At least that's an estimate that I read. I'm just one of them. But in another sense, someone with my name or your name, my identity, your identity, has never existed before in the history of the universe and will never exist again. And so in that sense, for us to be part of the divine reality means, for the first time, the divine is in relationship with me as a person. To live in that kind of experience of being part of that kind of unfolding, I think if we gave ourselves permission to feel that, we would start to laugh, just with the joy of it. What an amazing thing that we get to be here and be part of this. Yeah, look, you wake up one day and you have a headache, or your car gets in an accident, or something terrible happens, and you have a rough day. You're a good person having a very hard day. But the days when we just sit back and feel the privilege of being alive, the moments are, it's a precious thing. So then we're part of the unfolding experience of the divine in love and relationship with everything that is. We're part of this big, beautiful, amazing choreography, we might say.
Wow. I feel like I need to sit in silence to absorb all the things you shared now. So beautiful. Yeah, it also reminded me of how Maharaj says in the book that love drives God, like love is even about God, like so that kind of is similar to what you were saying, and
Yes.
yeah, I really love the not example, what you're saying about Jesus highlighting the kingdom of God, which
Yeah.
is like including everything. It's also like in the Gaudiya Vaishnava scriptures, we see, like we learn from there too, that we cannot isolate God from the creation.
Yes.
They're all like, it's connected. We cannot say we love God and not care about the
Yes.
rest of creation, so that's like a narrow vision of love.
Yes.
Actually, not even real love. But
Yes.
yeah, we can begin there. But the reality is that it all like includes everything.
I know that the Franciscan friar and Father Richard Rohr has been a deep friend and inspiration for Swami, and as he has been for me. And Richard's in his 80s now, um, and people, because they love him and care about him, they keep sending him gifts, right? And he gets boxes with gifts that people send. And he says, "Look, I'm an old man. live in a tiny little house. I don't have room for all these gifts." And he says, the gift that really matters to me is not something you could put in a box. He says, the gift that you could give to me is that if you notice what I care about and you care about what I care about, that's the gift that means the most to me, sincerely. So just for you to care about what what I care about, already I feel so grateful. You don't have to send me anything. Well, this idea that to love the divine, to love God, would mean that we would love what the divine loves, and to join in that love for everything is this beautiful journey, I think. And it invites us to the kind of growth that I think we all know. Yeah, if I take a step toward the light in that way, like a plant growing toward the light, if I grow another inch toward that, that's a better version of me.
Yeah, one of the teachers in our Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhupada, he would say, "If you love me, you love my dog."
Yes, yes, yes. I want to quote that. I love that. Yes, if you love me, you love my dog. Yes. Beautiful.
Mhm.
There was an interesting part that you said earlier, and when you said it, it was like kind of shocking to me. Um, you said, so like even in kingdoms where there is like where evil is the ruler, and nastiness, and that the rest, that the society will be that way. But then I just had this feeling like, no, actually, there will be people who continue to love. There will be people
Yes.
who continue to hold that good vibration, and eventually,
Yes.
that is what will
Yes.
will regrow and will
Yes.
re-empower the village, the kingdom, because to me, that's the, like Sweta Dweep brought out, that's the power of beingness. Is love is the force of life, and no matter how um, far away from that flow we get, that that flow is magnetic, and it will always draw everything back toward it.
I'm so glad you said that, Bhakti, because I think that's so important for us to remember. And the word faith means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. To a lot of people, faith primarily means a list of beliefs that they hold and argue about, and so on. But when you said that, it strikes me, if we imagine a land with a king who is greedy and corrupt and vicious and mean-spirited, and and then we imagine there's just a handful of people who say, we're going to stay kind and compassionate and loving, no matter how they behave, we want to try to keep that light alive in us, and we want to keep growing on that path. And even if it's a risk, and even if we could get in trouble for differing, we're going to try to. This is our goal. This is our dream. This is our true desire. In a sense, somebody might look at them and say, "You're outnumbered. What difference could you ever make?" But to me, this is where faith connects to this idea of potential that is in this beautiful chapter in Swami's book. Faith says we don't define the future based on what's happening at this moment. We look in this moment for what has the seeds of the most growth toward goodness and love and kindness and justice and so on. And so that little group of people who are resisting the evil of the current moment dare to have faith that the goodness that's within them will prove more powerful than the evil. To me, that is a definition of faith that will stand the test of time, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And we can see it in the lives of people like Eddie Hellison and Viktor Frankl, and just because it is, and even of those people who are perpetrating the evils, you know, we were speaking about this last night in a group that we were with Swami Padmanabha, that the brokenness of those who perpetrate harm upon others, and like your little seedling, that grew in the shadow and grew crooked, and in the brighter light of day will straighten itself out. So even the most crooked, the most broken of people have that potential in the bright sunlight where the sun is shining 360 degrees or around them, and to shower them at least by thought in that light. There is that potential for them to fulfill the volcanic energy of their positive potential, not just their negative one.
So it reminds me, I was part of a interfaith panel once some years ago, and on our panel were Christians and Buddhists and Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs and people from many different religious traditions, and different people were asking us questions. And so someone asked the question, and all of us were involved in social action of various forms. And someone asked, how does your faith change the way you do social action? And I'll never forget a Muslim leader, his name was Imam Dawood. He answered, and he said, and that just his way of speaking, you could tell he was sort of searching deep within him to see what would come up in response to this question. He said, I think the way my faith affects my social action is that I never give up on someone as a lost cause. And I think this is what you're saying, Bhakti Rasa, that we look at a person and realize this person could change. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said this. He said, our goal, we don't want to defeat our opponents. We want to win our opponents over to the side of love. We want to win them as friends. We don't want to defeat them as enemies. And so that vision, I think, is sometimes it's very hard for us in the middle of struggle to see that. I forget it sometimes. But I think when we see it, our action in the world is much more balanced and, in the long run, much more effective, even though it might seem naive to some people.
Yeah, and hearing that too, I had this fear arise within me where we might weaponize that as well.
Yes.
Like, oh, I can save you.
Yes.
You're an evil and horrible person. Here, let me shine my light on you.
Yes. Yes,
and
that's
and
right.
then weaponize that, thinking that, oh, I'm in the light and you're in the dark.
Well, this comes right back to the wisdom in Swami Padmanabha's chapter about this volcanic energy. It can, at any moment, the energy can burn down a city, or it can create the conditions for thriving.
Yeah, an example is it's the same electricity, and it can run a refrigerator or it can run a heater. It's like
Yes,
the same electricity doing completely opposite things.
that's right.
Yeah, so how to plug into the into the right into the right instrument, so
Yeah.
that we can first heal ourselves, our own, again, going back to that sapling, which is what I first thought of, is, and Swetadweep touched on this also, is our own internal obstacles, that what gets in the way of the
Yeah.
of the light hitting our own devotional creeper, what makes
Yeah.
us grow in crooked and twisted ways, and to tend to those things, to those rocks and those the shadows that exist within my own self, that
Mm.
make me grow in ways that are not straight and full of integrity.
Mm.
So those are, it always begins with us before we start looking outside.
And I think this is why, to be part of a community that, as you are part of, a community that invites us into silence and reflection, and to kind of enter that space where we feel our potential for good and harm, and we realize we have a role in trying to create and maintain the conditions within us that will lean us toward the creative and the kind. Yeah, that's a great treasure, to be part of a community like that.
To
Yeah.
be able to give back what we've been given.
Yeah.
If we are created by the overflow of God's joy,
Yes.
we are particles of joy, then
Yes.
to be able to give that back is such a opulence.
Amen. Yes.
Yeah. And it's a huge responsibility, isn't it? Because somehow it feels like it's, I mean, I don't know if it is easy, but somehow we can like easily go toward our negative potential. Like when we are in a difficult situation, we kind of tend to, like, somebody is like harsh to us, and it's really hard to like compose ourselves and like, just, yeah, it's like you were saying with your daughter and granddaughter, to say like, you're a really great person having a bad day, Immediately like all our defenses kick in and like we just want to attack. So
Yeah.
yeah, it seems like it's such a huge responsibility, and takes so much integrity to to move toward our brighter potential.
Yeah.
And doesn't Maharaj also say here that like um, less responsibility means less meaning, less purpose? Like many of us like can feel quite depressed and lack of purpose, um, like question, oh, we have not, like, why are we here, and like, unmotivated, uninspired, and all of that. But like here we can understand then that when we take responsibility, we can start to see meaning and purpose in life, which the responsibility would be to move toward the brighter potential, to move toward the light, like the sapling would. Which is amazing that like the plants just somehow they just go toward the light.
Yes. Yes. The light is what gives them life and energy. And so they're drawn, toward that life-giving energy. And I think this is very much where maybe here's a way to say it. There's a way that uh, uh, Svetadweep, that when you described how easy it is, someone's harsh to us, we want to be harsh back. um, that feels like I'm being pushed. I'm being pushed by a desire to retaliate. It's very different from the gentle pull of the light. And I suppose this is part of what we're all trying to do is we're trying to learn to feel the difference. It's something we almost feel in our bodies, I'm being driven right now, and I don't think this is going to take me to the place I want to be. How can I get back in touch with that gentle but powerful pull in a different direction?
Yeah. And the environment and the friends we have, like that matters a lot, right? Like even this conversation here, just hearing this example, like I'm just going to talk about this example now. Your daughter, granddaughter, just it's really touched me. And I think I'm going to share this a lot and also, implement in my own life. Yeah, I mean, yeah, to get there to have a pause and like react mindfully like that. Yeah, I kind of lost my train of thought where I was going with that. Sorry.
Believe me, it happens to all of us.
I think it was Viktor Frankl that said that there's a space between thinking and reacting. And the more we can slow down, and how I imagine it is kind of draw in to that center of self, to where it is that we want to go, to our core, and then we can slow that down and expand that time interval between the stimulus and the response, and give ourselves more spaciousness to be able to act in a way that is in alignment with how we want to be in the world.
As you say that, Bhakti Rasa, I think about a friend of mine. His name is Jim, and years ago, Jim taught me. He told me something he was trying to practice, and it was in a tense moment, because sometimes we're in such a reactive mode. He decided he would start a sentence. If he felt tension, he would try to develop a habit. And here's how the sentence begins: I would be curious to know. Um, and and the fact that it takes a little time to say, I would be curious to know. But what that does is he said that habit helped him slow down and shift from blame or counterattack to curiosity, from I want to fix you or correct you or retaliate against you, to I want to be curious about something. And he said, when I go into curiosity, I'm in a different way of being. So someone says something harsh and I'd say, I'd be curious to know why that bothers you so much, or I'd be curious to know more about how you came to feel that way, or I'd be curious. And if nothing else, it helps me do something other than have that negative reaction in that split second. It slows us down, just as you were saying.
Yeah. Actually, now I remembered what I was going to say with that earlier, that that I was talking about being in the right environment and in the right circle of friends, like even this conversation here, it's uplifting and inspiring and bringing us like, closer to like towards our brighter potential.
Yes.
So that's just so important. Like something I have been noticing a lot lately is how important it is to have like the right company, right, and be in a right environment that take us in that direction.
I think that's how Swami begins the chapter, isn't it? He talks about the importance of a guru, and in a sense, it's what draws us to great teachers and draws us to people who become our mentors and people who become our companions in that deep sense. Yeah, it's what draws us. We think these people are going in a direction that, and I love your phrase there, Sveta, these people are going in a direction of bright potential.
Yeah, that is super beautiful. And in this section, you're right, Maharaj talks about the guru and how he stands, that the mentors and those ones who really touch us stand before us as our greatest potential. And again, it's not like, oh, that's all I can be, this, but
Yeah.
that they touch something so deep within us that we can feel ourselves as being more than what we have ever been in the past, and that we there is an expansion to be had. And I love the phrase that you just shared with us about being curious,
Mm.
because for me, what that does is it enables us to rewrite a story. You know, the stories that we tell ourselves about what we are experiencing tend to be all stories that we wrote in the past that we're just reading and rewriting and re-saying. But if we let go of that certainty and take the position of curiosity, then we can rewrite the story and
Yes.
have all different kind of experiences that we've never had, and grow in directions that we never even knew were possible.
You know, it reminds me, in my years as a pastor, I remember I was a young man, my late 20s, early 30s, and I remember feeling a lot of pressure. Like everybody's expecting me to be, the teacher, the guru, the leader. And look at that. And it felt like so much pressure. And I also knew that I was disappointing people because I would make mistakes, and uh, and I felt that they had high expectations of me, and so they'd be very disappointed when I wasn't perfect. And I remember standing in front of the congregation at one point, and I said, "Listen, uh, I can really only promise you one thing, and that is I can promise you that I will make mistakes. um, I don't want to, but I'm sure that I will." And I said, "So I want to try to make it clear. I will never present an example of perfection. I can only present an example of growth, and I'll keep trying to learn from my mistakes." And so, and in a sense, I think that flows from what we're talking about with potential. We're all in a growth process. It never ends, and and we can offer each other something better than an example of perfection. We can offer each other an example of growth.
Yeah, that's super beautiful. Just that phrase that you said, we can offer each other something better than perfection.
Mm.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
That was great. So we
Yeah.
are headed towards the time to wrap up. Are there any leftover threads that either of you would like to tug on before we take a pause?
I just want to say what a pleasure it's been to be with you. I feel like I've made two new friends today, and I'm so grateful for this conversation.
Yeah. Thank you
Oh,
for being part of it.
yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, it was a beautiful conversation. And yeah, I'm really, I mean, I'm so fortunate to be able to sit here and have a conversation with you. I mean, both of you really, like, this is so nourishing. And yeah, to be called a friend, I am like super happy to hear that. Thank you.
Mhm. Well, it's very sincere, and I feel the honor is mine. So thanks for inviting me.
So we'll take our pause now and invite the listeners to contemplate what was shared today and how you can bring these points into your life as new behaviors, as new perspectives to change your angle of vision, to move you closer towards your potential. Thank you.
Reflect on the immense capacity within us for both sublime beauty and abhorrent actions. Let these thoughts and emotions flow freely, acknowledging the delicate balance between our brightest aspirations and our potential to falter. Embrace this integration of these contrasting elements, understanding that our highest potential is not diminished, but rather tempered and grounded by the awareness of our capacity to stray from the mark.